So if you play Pokemon Scarlet and Violet, or at least keep up with what's happening in them, you would know that Rowlet is not available in Pokemon Scarlet and Violet yet. Its files are technically in the game, but it's just not obtainable. But if you were able to get one, it would perform completely normally. And I found out that there was a way that I could get a Rowlet myself without hacking it in. It involved having babies with the babies of the hacker, but that means I really didn't do anything wrong personally. But once I got a Rowlet, I made babies with a new account so that I could do a Rowlet only playthrough. So let's see if you can beat Pokemon Scarlet and Violet with only Rowlets. But first, I had some rules for this challenge. Number 1, I must use Rowlet. Number 2, no items in battle, but held items are okay. Number 3, no over-leveling unless I found it to be necessary. Number 4, because of that, we are going to try to take on the badges in order. Number 5, I must ignore the switch-in messages as if I were playing on set mode. And finally, I'm not allowed to abuse the friendship mechanics, because otherwise every battle would be about winning with the power of friendship. And who has friends, let's be honest. So I had a full party of level 1 Rowlets to start with. And yes, I decided to use 6 Rowlets for this challenge instead of just 1. The main thing that does is make it so I don't have to crazy over level 1 Rowlet. Otherwise, I would be like 30 levels above everybody trying to outspeed them and one-shot them basically. So this way I can put a little more thought and planning into certain fights. So the first thing I did with these level 1 Rowlets is EV train them. Seeing as I have no money at all yet, I couldn't just buy vitamins even if they sold them at this point. And using the training weights for all 6 of them was kind of out of the question, so I did it the old-fashioned way. I quite literally killed 252 of each Pokemon that I needed. And I tried to do this on as low a level Pokemon as possible as to try to not overlevel too much for the first gym. Though me being overleveled for the first gym wouldn't really make too much of a difference. But I decided I wanted 252 EVs in HP and attack with 4 in speed. So I spent about 4 hours killing a bunch of Yungoos and Lechonks. 4 hours really wasn't all that bad, especially considering I'm always nerd-necking when I'm playing Pokemon Scarlet and Violet just to make sure I don't miss any shiny Pokemon. But surely I didn't find any shiny Pokemon this early, right? Well, wrong, my friend. I found 2 shinies while I was doing EV training. The first one was a shiny Lechonk, who spawned straight out of a childhood playground story. It spawned in after I killed exactly 100 Lechonks on Poco Path. What's even weirder is, I found another shiny Lechonk as I was scripting this part of the video. You can't even make this up, so who knows, maybe there's some truth to this playground rumor. And the second one I found was a shiny Tarantula, and at that point I needed exactly 1 more HP EV before I was going to leave the route. Some weird shiny Pokemon spawns, but definitely welcome. How many shinies will I find during the playthrough? Stay tuned. I finished up the EV training for speed on some fletchlings, and with all of that finished, half of my team was level 17, half was level 18. So I was going to be overleveled for the first couple of badges, but in this game the first 2 gyms are bug and grass types, which flying is super effective against. So the extra levels don't exactly matter too much here. But the first task I did was the Stony Cliff Titan, and wouldn't you know, we are also super effective against rock types with our grass typing. However, rock is also super effective against us, so we might have to be careful here. Or we would be if it weren't for the battle gimmick of this generation, and that's terastallization. I'll give a brief explanation for those who don't know Terratypes. Terratypes are basically a third typing your Pokemon can have in Gen 9. For most Pokemon, it's going to be one of their original types, but in some cases, it can be a completely different type. And you can use terastallization one time on one Pokemon, and then you have to go back to a Pokemon Center to be able to recharge. But using it allows you to completely change your Pokemon's type, and here I'm able to go to a grass type to get rid of my rock type weakness. After defeating the crab, the Rowlet stares into my soul for a few moments, then I feed my sandwich to a bicycle from the future and it gets superpowers from it. Imagine saying that in any other context. But with the power to speed around the region a little faster, it was time for me to get to what should have probably been the actual first gym, being the Cortando Bug Gym. And using the Flying Terra type, this one was also rather easy, as it gives us a resistance to bug we wouldn't have otherwise. And another benefit of the Terra type is that we now have additional damage bonus to the attacks with that type. And this is on top of the existing same type attack damage bonus for using attacks with our Pokemon's type. And on top of whatever item I might be using that boosts damage. I picked up some Sharp Beaks and Miracle Seeds to make our grass and flying attacks hit really hard. So with all of those bonuses and the EV training on top of each other, I was easily able to one-shot every Pokemon in this gym. This gives us our first gym badge and our second badge overall. Immediately after this, I went over to the Artezon Grass Gym to use the same strategy. However, Brassius uses Sudowoodo as his last Pokemon, which it has Sturdy, meaning I can't one-shot it, and it has pretty high defenses for for this early in the game. Peck is our best flying move at this point, so my double stab sharp beak boosted Peck only does a little over half of its HP. But thankfully this Sudowoodo seems hard-coded to want to use Trailblaze as its first move to get more speed, so it doesn't do much damage as it's a grass type move. It does outspeed me on the second turn thanks to that speed, however it doesn't do enough damage, so Also Round is able to take the W. Speaking of, I haven't introduced you guys to the Rowlets yet. We have Round Boy, Also Round, Roundish Bish, Quite Unround, Slight Round, and What Is Round. Take a guess as to why I named them how they were named, because there is a reason for it, and I'll reveal it later in the video. But after the Grass Gym, I went over to the Sky Titan Bombardier. Also Round has the Flying Terra type, allowing me to get rid of my weakness to flying that I would have with a normal Rowlet. 2 Terra Flying boosted packs are able to take it down, but he did take a significant amount of damage. And all of these Titan battles have 2 phases to them, and you don't auto-heal before the second fight, and it doesn't give you the chance to heal your Pokemon outside of battle. So because Also Round is low on HP, I had to swap him into What Is Round. Thankfully, the Titan goes for Torment that turn, and this also gave Arven's Knackley a free damage opening. And then the Bombardier proceeds to only target Arven's Knackley for the rest of the fight, meaning I took 0 damage on the second part of this fight, and were able to defeat it, and getting us to level 21, giving us Pluck, which makes our Terra Flying and Peck strategy even better. After this, I had a bit of an internal struggle on whether or not I wanted to include the Team Star fights in this, but I end up deciding to do it because they are technically badges, and this way I would do the entire game in level order. So the first of these is Giacomo's Dark types. The Let's Go battles were easy, but the boss fight proved to be the first touch of difficulty I would see in this challenge. His first Pokemon, Pawniard, has Aerial Ace, which means it deals a good chunk of damage. I do have Synthesis, which helps me heal a bit of that damage back, but Aerial Ace can't miss, so I wouldn't be able to be full HP going into Revavroom anyway. And yes, a literal car is the big bad Pokemon that they use. Something about this seems a little unfair to me, and this car is a problem because it's so fast that a +4 speed boost wasn't even enough to outspeed it, which means unfortunately Round Boy becomes the first Rowlet to faint in this challenge. Thankfully this isn't a Nuzlocke though, and he'll be right back. With Also Round coming in, it drops my special defense with a Metal Sound, giving it some pretty good damage on Snarl. And after a few plucks, I have to switch into What Is Round, who then promptly gets a Wicked Torqued to death. And at this point, I'm just trying to make sure I don't lose this fight. So I throw back in Also Round for him to get a little bit of extra chip damage with his remaining HP. Unfortunately, I accidentally didn't teach Pluck to everyone in the party, so on some of my Rowlets our best move is Razor Leaf, which does have a 5% chance to miss, and if it did, it would surely spell disaster. But thankfully our boy Slight Round comes through, hitting all 3 of his Razor Leafs and taking out the Segan Starmobile. With Team Star's Dark Crew defeated, it was time to head to Levincia for the Electric Gym, which for some reason is a lower level than the Fire Team base, which is keeping you from entering the city in the first place. So I do what any sane person would do. I jump off a cliff. The next area is positioned such that you can actually make the jump down to the lower area without actually having to take on the base. And even if it wasn't laid out this way, if you have the Flying Titan done, you get the ability to surf, so you could just take the long way around in the water anyway. But before we take on the third gym, Nemona will want to have a battle with you. She leads off with a rock type, Rockruff. A little scary, but I do outspeed it, one-shotting it and securing the speed boost from Trailblaze. This is a new move in this game, and it is very pivotal to this challenge later on. It's a 50 base power grass type move that will always raise your speed after using it. While 50 base power is quite low, the move is still useful even much later in the game. With a speed boost, we outspeed and one-shot her Palmy as well. Unfortunately, the ability Static paralyzes me, negating this speed boost. And this is actually kind of scary because Nemona actually has the fire type starters, being Fuecoco, Crocolore, and Skeletor. And this is because I took Quaxley in the beginning. Originally, I was thinking I would use it to do the breeding with, but I ended up just trading myself a Ditto anyway. But the point is, she has a fire type, and we're weak to fire types unless we are Terra Flying. But thankfully, because we can get rid of our fire weakness, Also Round was able to take it out with a Shadow Sneak. And now we can actually take on the gym. And as a streamer and YouTuber, I find Iono to be incredibly cringe. All she cares about is the viewer numbers, and not the journeys she has with the people that she's interacting with. Take heart, kind viewer, I do incredibly appreciate you making it to this point in the video. And if you're enjoying yourself so far, consider liking the video for me. And if you want to see me do more stuff like this, the best way you can help me do that is by subscribing to the channel. These things are important, that's why we ask you to do them. But on to the gym leader, and she's actually one of the tougher gym leaders for this challenge, and it's mostly because her lead is a flying type. It takes about a third of my HP every time with pluck, and I don't have a great counter with just one Rowlet, so I lead Roundish Bish. Her job is to shadow sneak the Watchful to death using the muscle band to increase the damage a bit. Then she needs to intentionally die to the next Pokemon, Bellybolt, but she gets a good bit of damage in before going down. And then I send in Round Boy, terrestrializing him and using Trailblaze to get some more speed. I just need him to not get paralyzed by Spark, and that happens here. Then the Luxio comes in using Bite, dealing a pretty low amount of damage. I'm able to use Synthesis to heal up and then take it out. And now at level 27, Round Boy learns Sucker Punch, another good move for this challenge. Seeing as Rowlet is slow, having a pretty high base power priority move is rather good. Her final Pokemon is Miss Magius, who goes for a Confuse Ray and Hex combo, getting a crit in the process. It does take 3 Trailblazes to take it out, thankfully being able to avoid confusion, taking the rest of my HP. And with that, we have the 3rd gym badge and the 6th badge overall. After a tiny bit of exploration and leveling, it's time to take on the Team Star Fire Base. The auto battles are rather sketchy, as we are a grass type, but you're given 10 minutes to complete this thing, so it's pretty much impossible to fail. But on the boss fight, however, I did actually fail my first attempt, as I failed to realize the power of the sun. Even with being able to mitigate my weakness to fire, the sunlight boosted fire attacks are still a force to be reckoned with. To have any chance against this at a reasonable level, I have to use my brain. I lead this fight with Quite Unround, teaching her Protect for her to use once, stalling out one of the sun turns. She then plucks and gets one shot by Torkoal's Flame Wheel. Round Boy then comes in, getting a pluck to land, and he actually tanks the hit from Torkoal. He does get burned, which will drop his attack a bit, but he's just in there to get some extra chip damage anyway. What is Round comes in, living on just 4 HP, being able to take out the Torkoal with the sunlight having faded. Now it was time for the Rever Room, the Shadar Starmobile. My only option was to Sucker Punch it, which unfortunately doesn't do a whole lot. On the switch in to Roundish Bish, I make the correct read, thinking it will go for Screech, which allows me to get some good damage in with a pluck before having to use Sucker Punch the next turn, and I'm able to repeat those moves with Slight Round. But this whole situation is looking pretty grim for Also Round because it's still at half HP here. I go Terra Flying, and 2 plucks is enough to get it into the red. It has gone for Screech twice, putting me at -4 defense, and I have to rely on Sucker Punch getting the KO. And because Also Round was a higher level than our other birds, his Sucker Punch was just able to take out the remaining HP. If not for Sucker Punch, it would have easily outsped Also Round and easily one-shot him. But the Sucker Punch is able to secure me the victory, giving us the 7th badge overall. With Mela defeated, it was time for the Steel Titan, Orthworm, and I didn't really have to level up too much for this one. A Terra Grass boosted Leaf Blade from Round Boy doesn't really do anything, and when it goes for Iron Tail, it does do a lot of damage. But thankfully it goes for Wrap the next turn, allowing me to heal with Synthesis. I was able to Sucker Punch it and getting a crit in the process. However, it then proceeds to headbutt me, getting 2 flinches in a row, forcing me to switch out. I go into Roundish Bish, who is still holding the Muscle Band, getting a damage boost on the Sucker Punch. But she's only able to get 1 in before I have to switch her out too. Even with it going this way, I decided I would try to avoid deaths on this battle. So I go into What is Round next, and then Orthworm just starts using Wrap, which lets me easily finish it off for the first battle. And after it munches on some drugs, we are ready for round 2. I lead with Round Boy, going for Terrestrialized Leaf Blades, getting 2 of them to crit in the process. Arvin's Toadschool confuses it with Supersonic, and sponges a hit, allowing me to safely get it into the red. I finish it off with an unnecessary crit from Sucker Punch, and after the cutscenes, my Miraidon is able to jump higher. After this, I went on a mission to murder a bunch of Ghastly, prepping some Nightshade TMs that I literally never used, and then after that, I took on the Water Gym, which means it was actually time to chase a man across the desert, trying to give him his wallet back, and having his gym trainer stop me from giving him his wallet. What his gym trainer didn't know is that I had an entire team of Grass-type Pokemon easily dealing with him, and we bring the gym leader his wallet back just in time to buy some drugs.
Vault in Valusa. It's
The dankest kush I've ever seen. After buying his weed, we then head back to the gym, and it's actually time to fight. He leads with the fish, Veluza, which knows Pluck for some reason, presumably to cover that grass-type disadvantage, but that doesn't quite save him from a terastallized Leaf Blade. His Wugtrio gets a flinch from Headbutt, but the damage isn't quite enough to be an issue, healing it back with Synthesis. His final Pokemon would normally be a terrible matchup for me, however, it misses a Slam, allowing me to one-shot it with Leaf Blade. Easy Water Gym. However, next up in the leveling order is the Poison-type Team Starbase. And it sucks, but Atticus proved to be quite a bit of a wall for this challenge when fighting him at the same level. It's a pretty big difference between him and the previous Team Star leader, as he has 4 fully evolved Pokemon, and this is Poison-type, which is super effective against the Rowlets. On my first attempt, I didn't even make it to fighting the big car, because for some reason he gets to have 2 of them. So I decided instead of taking that on right now, I did some wandering around, discovering some new fast travel points, including Medali for when we take on the normal type gym. And it was just outside of Medali that I would find our 3rd shiny Pokemon of the playthrough. That is shiny. The fuck? I'm really glad I looked up what shiny Persian looked like at some point, because otherwise I would have completely missed this thing. But after this we had some more downtime, and during this I would be seeking out some Zangoose and Scyther, and I needed to find a bunch of them as they are the Pokemon that will allow me to teach Swords Dance to the Rowlets. Oddly, Rowlet learns Nasty Plot by level up when it is a worse special attacker than physical. It basically needs TMs to learn any special moves at all. But much of this time I spent roaming around leveling up for the next segment was in search of these 2 Pokemon. I also needed Gibbles, but I knew exactly where to find those in adequate numbers. You can easily find Scyther at the big lake, but they're going to be level 45 or higher. And I had seen a Zangoose in the cliffs area earlier, but the ponds at the south were a much better source of them. Scythers were supposed to be to the west of that, but I don't think I ever found one down there. After a while, I just kind of gave up for the time being, seeing as I was on the verge of being rather over-leveled. So at this point I decided before I would take on Atticus, I decided I would do the Medali Gym instead. And for the record, I completely guessed the secret dish on my first try in my original playthrough. I did not know that you could actually fail this. When I found out you could fail, my mind was blown because the odds of guessing the right dish here is actually really low. And it took me 3 or 4 tries to figure out what it was this time. By the time we got to the gym leader, Larry, though, it was time to unveil my secret, forbidden strategy, the Suicide Burb. The strat here is to equip every burb with a sharp beak and make sure they know the move Brave Bird, and then you just plow through the entire enemy team, not caring about that recoil damage because you have more birds in the back. As long as you're decently close to one-shotting, or at least two-shotting them, and the opponent doesn't have a full party, it's quite a useful tactic. It's a simple and meat-headed strategy, but effective. So for Larry, I lead with What Is Round, who knocks Komala into the red instantly. It goes for Yawn, allowing me to Sucker Punch it the next turn, winning the battle without taking damage. Next up was Dudunsparce, and unfortunately, What Is Round was not able to wake up to deal any damage. So I send in Slight Round, and the Suicide Bird strat puts him to half health. I Sucker Punch the next turn, giving Roundish Bish a clean Leaf Blade opportunity for the kill. Then comes in Staraptor, and Roundish Bish goes down after a Sucker Punch. I then swap to Round Boy, who was the strongest of the Suicide Burbs, although him and Also Round don't have Sucker Punch on their movesets, but it was alright, because Round Boy was able to bring Staraptor into the red with 1 Brave Bird. This allowed Quite Unround to come in and Sucker Punch for the kill, which won me the fight without even needing to Terastallize, and against a Pokemon with a super effective move no less. And because this was my 5th gym, Nemona now wants to take me on. I do get healed before this fight, so I'm free to implement the same Suicide Burb strategy. What Is Round is able to one-shot the Gumi. Then comes in Palmo, which I thought it would be faster than, so I didn't Sucker Punch, and that was a mistake. It goes for a Thunder Wave, paralyzing me, but Slight Round is then able to one-shot it. She's faster, has double stab Torch Song, and this boosts its special attack after every use. And the main out that I had would have been to Terastallize the now level 40 Also Round, whose Brave Bird would have likely one-shot it with all of the boosts. And because we were Terastallize getting rid of our weakness, it wouldn't have gone down to 1 Torch Song. However, I forgot to Terastallize to get rid of that Fire-type weakness, so Also Round goes down, and then by the time Quite Unround comes in and I try to do the same thing, Skeledirge's extra boost was was enough to one-shot her, and that was it. I had nothing else that would be able to take out her Skeledirge, and I actually lost this battle. But I didn't feel like redoing the 5th gym in order to win this fight, and I think it's better for our storyline here that I wasn't able to win this one. But now armed with the foolproof Suicide Burb strategy, I was now ready to take on the Poison Crew. I lead with Roundish Bish as Skuntank goes for Toxic the first turn. Like, please man, this is a Suicide Burb. It's supposed to die. A Brave Bird brings it into the red, allowing a Sucker Punch to clean it up. And then I have her Sucker Punch the Muck before she goes down. Pause. Though I could have had her Brave Bird because she would have just been faster than the Muck, as I found out with What Is Round. Then, against the smaller of the two cars, a Brave Bird does a little over a third of the HP, and I Sucker Punch before going down, bringing it within range for Round Boy to hit it with a Suicide Bird. And now we are on to the Na'vi Starmobile. It outspeeds me, going for Noxious Torque, which leaves Round Boy on 2 HP. His Suicide Burb does about a third of the HP we need. Then, also Round comes in hot with the Terra-boosted Brave Bird. It unfortunately comes in with a spicy critical hit against me. Also Round then does some huge damage back, but he doesn't have Sucker Punch at this point to cheese a little bit of extra damage out of it. So far, putting Swords Dance on him has not been a great pick, but Quite on Round is able to come in and finish the job. The Suicide Burb strat is very real at this point. This fight is an example of one that would likely need to be completed with a level 70 solo Rowlet, so I think using 6 Rowlet was the correct choice for this one. With Atticus down, our next stop is the mountains, as the Ghost Gym is up next. Psst. Hey Charlie, how you doing? I must say, I really liked double battles in this challenge. I just wish they happened more. Imagine this game with double battles only though. That would be something. Anyway, I don't know which of these gym leaders is more cringe, Rhyme or Iono. I guess a streamer and a rapper gym leader had to happen eventually, but just... why? She leads with Mimikyu and Banette, while I lead with What Is Round and Slight Round. Mimikyu can be a problem in some cases because of disguise. However, it wasn't much of an issue here. As we've gone over, Rowlet gets Sucker Punch, which is super effective against ghosts. What I didn't account for was the fact that Banette has Icy Wind. It does the majority of my HP as a spread move, which means it's dealing half damage, by the way. A Brave Bird will deal half of its HP though, and I break Mimikyu's disguise on turn 1. Then Mimikyu is able to Shadow Sneak on What Is Round, even when he had used Sucker Punch, because apparently it only gives priority over the Pokemon you used it against, and not just a general priority. I did not know that was a thing before this. So next turn, Roundish Bish comes in, and I Sucker Punch Banette, followed by a Leaf Blade to Mimikyu. Though I should have Sucker Punched that too, honestly, just to have that extra HP. I Sucker Punch and Brave Bird focus Toxtricity, as the poison type moves it could have would pose a threat. It only used Hex though, but it was able to take down a Rowlet with it. And Houndstone hits Roundish Bish for big damage, leaving her on 3 HP for her Brave Bird. But last I checked, I can still attack on 3 HP, so we were able to win this fight. And I didn't even need 3 of my Burbs, even though the other 3 just completely fainted. Rhyme may be more cringe than Iono, but she's not the better gym leader in my opinion. So next up after this was the Ultra Dawn fan. But before I was even able to get there, I had an unexpected interruption from one of the best shinies in the game. That's a shiny, that's shiny, that's shiny. Oh my god. It's so good, man. It's so good. Oh my god, dude. Instead of a ball of dung, it's a ball of gold. Quite the fitting shiny. Thankfully, I was able to get that on recording, because the few recordings before that, my OBS kept crashing. But with that captured, let's go ahead and start the Iron Treads fight. I lead with What Is Round, and he gets absolutely demolished in 2 hits, getting flinched on turn 1, so he dealt no damage. I swapped in Round Boy, going Terra Grass Leaf Blade, and 3 of those is enough to take him out, as it goes for Knock Off and Rapid Spin instead of an actually good move for me. It redeems itself in the second fight though, using Iron Head, and getting a crit effectively one-shotting Round Boy. Also Round also then gets bullied by it. It's as if this thing thinks it's more round than the Round Squad here. Is that where we're naming these guys, by the way? The Round Squad? Anyway, Arvin Scovillain does some big work on this fight, so we're able to pull off the victory on Burb number 3. After giving my bicycle PEDs, it was time for this Psychic type gym in Alfornada. But first we have a fight with Nemona to deal with. I lead with Slight Round, who is actually a lower level than her Lycanroc at this this point, and the Burb squad is weak to rock types. So Lycanroc came in with the immediate one-shot. So that incurred a reset where I would swap in Round Boy to lead. Round Boy is a little stronger at this point, and he's able to live on 7 HP and fight back with an Overgrow Leaf Blade. Rowlet is not faster than a Sliggoo, so Round Boy goes down the next turn. What is Round comes in for the Suicide Burb, and then it's Pawmot, who I knew I needed to Sucker Punch because otherwise it would just KO me without doing anything. Next up was Slight Round, and I went with the odd strategy of just Sucker Punching it instead of doing a Suicide Burb. I did this because I actually wanted Also Round to come in and set up, so we'd have a way to deal with the big bad alligator. So Also Round comes in, uses a Swords Dance, then uses Synthesis to regain some HP. We trade Spark and Synthesis until I'm comfortable with the amount of HP that I have, and then I get rid of the Pawmot. And on its last turn, Pawmot comes in with a Thunder Wave Miss, allowing me to be mostly healthy to fight Skeledirge. And I actually remembered to click the Terastallize button this time, so then we have Also Round do a Suicide Burb for the win. And it was a true Suicide Burb, because Also Round fainted due to recoil. A true hero he was. The Psychic-type gym challenge is so weird, I don't even want to talk about it. So on to the battle, and Farigiraf completely outplays me to start off. I lead with Slight Round, and I did my typical Suicide Burb, and then I was like, okay, Sucker Punch time. But Farigiraf's ability prevents priority moves from hitting it. Simply outplayed. So I have to use What is Round to finish it off. Then Gardevoir comes in, and I Sucker Punch expecting her to kill him, and I was correct. But I knew she probably wouldn't kill a fresh bird from full HP, allowing Quite Unround to get her down with a Suicide Burb. With Espathra coming in, I'm in the red, so I Sucker Punch for some massive damage. Next turn, she Psychics Roundish Bish to a nice amount of HP remaining as I knock Espathra out, bringing in Florges. Knowing she was going to go down, I Sucker Punched, and then I have Also Round come in to clean the fight up. I Terra boosted the Brave Bird, which was probably not necessary, but we were able to beat this gym with about half of the team being underleveled. After this, I used up my XP candies and ventured over to the lake, because I was going to need some levels before the next badges. And at the lake, I found our 5th shiny. However, I almost ended up failing this one. For one, I saved too close to it, which made it flee, but it came back as a Gyarados came over and ran into me. I would have failed it if not for the save, as it fled again before I could even get into a battle with it, but from my save I just had to stare in front of me and throw my Rowlet as it spawned back in. But my god, that was a close one, and this definitely is one of those shinies that I would have actively hunted for later on, so getting it randomly while I can, that was great. And this near fail brings me to a bit of a tangent here, but I would say that in Scarlet and Violet, failing shinies is an inevitability, and that's just kind of a fact that you'll have to accept if you are going to enjoy the game to its fullest. Whether it's a Pokemon that has a self-destructive move, one that spawns on the edge of your render range and leaves before you can get to it, one that is incredibly difficult to tell from the base form, or you just plain didn't see it because you weren't sitting there 100% nerd-necking over your screen. But there comes a point where if you fail a shiny, it ends up not being that big of a deal, unless it was one that you were actively hunting for that took a little bit longer than usual. Because if you just actually take the time and hunt down that specific shiny, you're gonna get it in pretty much no time at all most of the time. This whole dialogue isn't some precursor to me missing a shiny, by the way. It's just a major initial gripe that I had about the game was the lack of a shiny notification like we had in Legends Arceus. Because without it, especially at the start of my initial journey, I was nerd-necking every single Pokemon making sure it wasn't shiny. I still do that quite a bit, but I think I've come to terms at this point that it wouldn't be the end of the world to miss a shiny. After all, there's so much more to this game than shiny Pokemon, such as fighting the next gym, where, as expected, I end up dying to Grusha a lot. All things considered, the game has been pretty easy so far, even with everything being around the same level. There's been an absolute maximum about 10 times that I reset the game at this point because I would have lost, but remember, it was only very recently that our opponents have started having fully evolved Pokemon. But starting about here, with Grusha, the difficulty does ramp up quite a bit. If you're confused as to why, it's because Rowlet takes 4 times damage from Ice-type attacks. And even if I Terastallize, I will still be weak to Ice, since Grass or Flying is still weak to Ice. And I realize now that I could have changed one of my Rowlets to Terra Normal because they allow you to do that for free, but at the time I hadn't played around with changing Pokemon Terra types at all yet, not even on my main save file, so we're gonna be weak to everything in this gym. I initially tried the gym at level 49 on my best Burb, and he literally didn't even last one turn, with only taking double damage. So I thought, alright, well, Sucker Punch exists, resists, this will allow me to outspeed everything at least, and I went and bought some black glasses to make it deal more damage. But this was only the second attempt, and I kind of forgot something. That Blizzard can miss, and it quite comically misses both times on Quietunround's first try as our lead Rowlet. But even with getting through Frostmoth on 0 damage taken, it doesn't exactly help against the rest of the Pokemon. Beartic would take 4 or 5 hits to take down, and Icicle Crash is guaranteed one shot on every burp. I would need a couple of critical hits to make this even remotely reasonable. I had 4 Rowlets going into Satitan, and I threw one away because I thought it was going to go for Snowscape first turn, but I should have realized that since it's a guaranteed one shot, that it probably wouldn't do that. So yeah, I failed this one, but I wanted to try multiple different strats that I thought of. My next attempt would be the more meta of these strats, which would be a Trailblaze Substitute Protect Swords Dance setup. And I'm pretty sure from now on, Roundboy will almost always have this exact moveset, until we get to like the really endgame stuff. And this attempt dies on turn 2. It used Tailwind, something I didn't foresee happening, so my first turn Protect was wasted, and it kills me with a Bug Buzz on turn 2. But it's okay, I can just try again, and it'll use Blizzard instead. The RNG involved with this Frostmoth is just entirely cringe if you ask me, so the next attempt starts right. Some Blizzard misses, and I actually got an okay setup going. But Bug Buzz has a 100% accuracy, so it's never going to miss, and it's still enough to one-shot me when I go Terra Grass. The real solution to this all would have been to teach Substitute and Protect to someone else, and then switch into Roundboy when Frostmoth only had Tailwinds left. But I probably would have had to do that with all of the Rowlets, and I was feeling lazy at the time, too lazy to get more Substitute and Protect TMs. So I hit my head against the wall with the Roundboy strat for a while, and found what I think was the best opening. I Trailblaze to start with speed, hoping it misses with Blizzard. Then I Substitute to give me a cushion to set up with. Then I would Swords Dance until I basically have to attack, hoping it would just miss basically all of the Blizzards. Obviously, the RNG involved with such a strat would be ludicrous, and you'd be correct for thinking that. And that's why I gave up and just leveled up Roundboy a bunch. Looking back on it, there was one last thing I could have tried that I didn't realize was a thing. Rowlet does indeed get Double Team as an egg move in this game, so if I would have found a Pokemon with Double Team and given Rowlet a Mirror Herb, then he could have learned it. And that of course would still require a good amount of luck to pull off at level, but you know, it seems like it would have been possible. So I'm kind of upset with myself for not realizing that that was a possibility to do here. We would have had to use this strat for several fights going forward, but instead I just leveled up a bunch, and it still took a good amount of luck even with all these level ups, so I'm not too concerned about that. I tried again at level 54 and basically nothing changed, so then I tried at level 62 because that was all the experience candies I had, and I had the strat going well. I ran it out of Blizzards, but little did I know about this tiny little detail. Bug Buzz can go through Substitutes. Yeah, so all sound-based moves hit through Substitute, which was something I didn't know at the time, so it was now that I realized that if I was going to do this with just one Rowlet, that I would have to do it before Blizzard ran out of PP. And with this realization, it wasn't too long before we had the final Grusha attempt. I start with Substitute because I'm faster than it at this level. I Protect for 1 Blizzard PP, then Swords Dance. It hits the second Blizzard for the Substitute, then I Big Balls a Swords Dance here, and then I Terrastallize Trailblaze for the kill. Then I just have to keep clicking Trailblaze until I win. So yeah, getting past this was basically either level up or try to use Double Team, and at the time I didn't realize Double Team was an option as an egg move, and so is Confuse Ray evidently, so there were a couple of cheesy strategies I could have used to finish this at level, but I didn't realize that at the time again, so let's move on. After this I did a bit of adventuring, getting all of the round squad up to level 50, and some of you might know what that means. It's hyper training time. So if you don't know, Pokemon stats are determined by quite a few things, one of those being IVs. They're basically a Pokemon's genetics, and they range from 0 to 31. However, with the power of bottle caps for some reason, we can bypass our genetics and become the perfect specimen of a Pokemon. And this is actually how I gave all of the round squad their names, based on how close they were to having all of their stats perfect. I didn't know one of the parents' IVs because I started a new save file on somebody else's Switch, traded it over there, which means I didn't have the judge function unlocked on it, but all of the birds I ended up choosing had at least 3 perfect IVs. Slight Round and What is Round were almost twins. They were lacking perfection in HP and defense. Unfortunately, the Lady Rowlets weren't that great. Roundish Bish was imperfect in HP, attack, and defense, but a couple of those were on the higher side. Quite Unround, as the name might suggest, was the worst of the Rowlets. She was imperfect in HP, defense, and speed, a couple of those being rather low IVs. But then we had the top dogs. Also Round was lacking in defense and special attack, but we really don't care about missing special attack because Rowlet is a physical attacker, so he was a bit closer to perfection than most of them. But But what about Round Boy? Well, he was about as close to perfect as I could have possibly asked for. He had perfect IVs in HP, attack, special defense, and speed. So his one imperfect stat was defense. However, it was pretty close to perfect. As I later calculated, it was a 29. That is very solid, and that's probably the most genetically gifted Pokemon you've ever seen in a challenge run that didn't use any RNG manipulation or something. And outside of maybe the starters from Let's Go Pikachu and Eevee, who are forced to be genetically perfect. But since the rest of the round squad is level 50 now, all of that doesn't really matter. Once I have enough money, I can make all of them have the stats of a genetically perfect Pokemon, which will put everyone on the same page. But Round Boy, however, I chose to leave his imperfect physical defense because a 29 is not that much worse than a 31. In fact, with Rowlet's base stats, that's only 2 defense points difference at level 100. So he will remain in his natural state very close to perfection, but everybody else gets the PEDs. But back to actually playing the game, and our next stop was the Team Star Fairy base. This fight is unfortunately not the easiest out there. It's fairy types which not only have Charm to reduce attack by 2 stages, but they also have Baby Doll Eyes, which is a priority attack drop. And really none of the Pokemon makes sense to set up on. Azumarill is a monster lead, and everything else is at least a fully evolved Pokemon. After a few attempts without using him, I decided to try and use Round Boy for this, so I had him use Substitute as Azumarill goes for Charm. Many status moves don't affect substitutes, so this actually did nothing. I had Round Boy use Swords Dance as Azumarill goes for Bounce, which, yeah, it has that by the way, but I would be able to protect on the second turn of the bounce, allowing Round Boy and his substitute to not take damage from it. On my second Swords Dance, Azumarill does Aqua Tail. With a substitute up and outspeeding, I was given the green light to Trailblaze Ortega's entire team. But even with a full setup, I still was not able to one-shot the Starmobile. That's actually pretty crazy, but I knew I wouldn't be needing Round Boy for the next badge, which was the Dragon Titan badge. Although the actual dragon is pretty small, and the not a Dragon Titan is pretty big. There's just several layers to the whole false Dragon Titan thing. But anyway, I use What Is Round with a Miracle Seed, and his Grass Terra Leaf Blade was able to easily two-shot Dondozo for the first fight. Dondozo gets slightly stronger for the second fight, taking 3 Leaf Blades to take out. However, he was not able to deal any damage to me. For some reason, the Tatsugiri Titan knows Icy Wind. Just why? Thankfully I terrestrialized, so it wasn't able to one-shot me, but it eventually was able to take down What Is Round. But Arven's Greedent was actually able to take it out on the same turn, because it had lowered Tatsugiri's defense a bit. After we fed the final dose of drugs to Arven's dog, it was time for the final badge, Team Star's Fighting Base. Which should be easy peasy, right? We are a flying type after all, just a bit of suicide burb action maybe? Well, her first Pokemon is a Toxicroak, which outspeeds and one-shots the entire team, except for who I terrestrialized to flying. And even then, the thing still knocks out Also Round because it deals over half HP on the first turn, and I get poisoned, which means that there was too much recoil damage. But you know, I was a bit underleveled here because I thought fighting types would be naturally easy with a flying type. So I decided to come back a few levels later, and with everyone at level 55, I try again, this time leading Also Round. And I have Round Boy in the back just in case. I one-shot Toxicroak, but next was Annihilape, and Annihilape has Ice Punch. And yeah, there's no chance that I survive against that. And again, for this Ingrusha, there was probably something I could have done with double team egg move shenanigans, but I didn't actually realize that until after I was done with this entire challenge. So it was back to the drawing board until level 60, and yes, level 60 is what I needed to survive Toxicroak with super effective damage. This was so I could save my terrestrialization for later. So I'm able to trade What Is Round for Toxicroak. I throw in Quite Unround, and she goes with Passimian. Of course, it has to get a critical hit on me with Rock Tomb, that's just the rule around here, but it's not enough to kill, so I'm able to Suicide Burb to take it out. And I decide to throw in Round Boy, who is only a few levels higher than everyone else at this point, but she sends in Lucario, which is not what I was planning for. I use Substitute and Protect to sponge a couple of hits, but I should have just Brave Birded it straight up, since that's what I do to take it out anyway. And then Annihilate comes in, and I just try to run out a couple of the Ice Punch PP. And this was even though I wasn't set up for a full PP stall, but after that I go Also Round, and at level 60 Terrestrializing saves me from being one-shot, and I Brave Bird it for the kill. Also Round has a little bit of HP remaining, so I decide to Sucker Punch, and that was the worst thing I could have done because it barely did any damage. And the car has the Stamina ability, which raised its defense, but it also uses Spin Out, which harshly lowers its speed, allowing us to be faster. It then goes for a couple of shift gears, so it's faster now, allowing me to get in some crucial damage. Coming down to my last burb, Roundish Bish comes in. Spin Out only does about half her HP, and even with the defense raises, she was able to come in and take it out. And even with using Round Boy, who is just a bit above everybody at this point, it was pretty close in the end. And because of recoil damage, I still needed to have a decent amount of HP left in order to survive the fight and count it as a win, since if all of your Pokemon faint, it takes priority over you actually winning the fight. But we were able to pull it off in the end without having to overlevel too much. But with this one done, we have all of the badges now, and now we just have to finish up all of the storylines. I head over to the Lighthouse Lab first to progress Arvin's storyline, and I thought I would be ready to take him on, because I remembered him being somewhat easy in my original playthrough, but in reality, he's actually got a pretty solid team, especially for a context of a challenge like this. For my challenge, he has 3 Pokemon that pose a threat, those being Scovillain, Cloyster, and Garganacl. Scovillain will outspeed me and one-shot me with Fire Blast. Garganacl is slower, but is able to kill me with Stone Edge, whereas it takes me 3 hits to kill him, and Cloyster is the worst, outspeeding me and having a guaranteed one-shot with Icicle Spear. Even his Toedscruel poses a threat as well, since it's fast and knows Sludge Bomb. So I gave this a few attempts, but decided that I was going to have to come back, at least with more Burbs having Substitute, Protect, and or Swords Dance. But this is when I got another idea of what I could possibly do to defeat Arvin in a clean manner. And the rest of the game was also going to pose some similar issues, especially the one where I'm kind of weak to ice types all the time. But what if I wasn't weak to ice types? I think you can see where this is going. I decided to grind Terra Raid Den. I did this for 2 reasons. One was if I felt I wanted to have any chance in the endgame, I was going to need some way to mitigate some of our weaknesses on the team. And the other reason was to make this challenge run a bit unique from the others you might see for the game. How many people do you think are going to sit there and grind Terra Raid Dens for 2 days straight to change the Terra type of their entire team? Not many. So like the video, damn it. But also just, come on, don't you just salivate at the concept of a fire type Rowlet? It just feels so wrong to say, but so right that it's a thing. And this would probably be one of the only iterations of this Rowlet challenge that could even have something like that. So I decided that it was going to be worth the grind. But this entire grind for Terra Shards could have actually been a lot easier on myself, because I thought I was going to need to use the Delibird raid event that was happening at the time to get a guaranteed Terra Shard out of a raid den, and you really don't need that at all. And I didn't even look this up till much later into the whole grind for this, but any 3 or 4 star raid dens give you 2 Terra Shards at minimum for a 3-star, and you can get 3 or 4 in a 4-star. And yes, while the 5-star Delibird raid gave you a bunch of extra Terra Shards, that was locked behind the post game, which I am trying to beat with said strategy. But you know, I could have just been grinding this on regular 3 and 4-star raid dens, because, you know, those would have been much easier, especially considering they wouldn't have had ice moves on every single Pokemon, and they can contain much easier Pokemon in general, such as Magikarp, or even Dittos would have been great, because I could bring a level 1 Pokemon into it, and it would copy the stats of my level 1 Pokemon aside from the HP, allowing the NPCs to take it out. So yeah, because I didn't realize I didn't have to do Delibird, this took quite a bit longer than it probably needed to, but to be honest, the grind on Delibirds themselves wasn't all that bad either, because I was able to just AFK farm them, because using the Suicide Burb strat, it was basically impossible to fail the 3 or 4 star raids no matter how much I died. So I just had my turbo controller spamming my damaging move, and the raids were quite trivial because of that. And because these were quite trivial, I was getting some solid benefits out of it. One of those was getting an absolute stockpile of experience candies. I actually hit the 999 cap on medium candies a couple of times, and that was after selling some of them the first time. And the second big benefit was I was getting a ton of money from these items. And third, I was running into shiny Pokemon on my way to the raid dens. Just check out all of the shiny Pokemon that I found on Christmas Eve.
Been starting to wonder why I was not running into a shiny for a while.
That changes. Well then. Very nice and vibrant shiny. I was just flying overhead, dude. So this actually means a lot because shiny Meryl was my first shiny. It may have been a female as well. I don't know. It was in the Safari Zone, actually. Jesus, man. I just want to frickin' get this done. God. But these are good shinies, too. I found another one, dude. I found another one. I was just about to walk past this. I was like, what is this thing? Like, it was... I was like thinking it was like a Jigglypuff or something, but they don't even spawn here. 5 entirely full odd shinies on Christmas Eve. No shiny charm here, just an insane amount of luck. And if you're keeping track at home, that's 9 shinies at this point. What a very fitting Christmas gift from this game. Naturally, I didn't play at all on Christmas, but by the day after Christmas, I had enough Terra shards of the Terra types that I wanted to use. I kept Round Boy with the Terra Grass to have at least one Rowlet with extra bonus on the grass moves, and also Round stayed Terra Flying for the same reason. But otherwise, I changed Quite Unround to the Fire Terra type, Roundish Bish to the Electric Terra type, Slight Round to the Dark Terra type, and What is Round to Ice Terra type. So we finally had a Rowlet that was of the same type that was giving us so much grief during this run. And after I was done with this, I was going to try to do another grind of getting PP maxes from the auction house before deciding that it was finally time to retry Arven anyway, because I wasted about an hour trying to get one single PP max from the auction house, and it didn't happen. And with our abundance of experience candies, I decided to raise everybody's level to match Round Boy at level 67. But don't worry, this doesn't break the game too much because it still took me several tries to beat Arven. Even a +6 Swords Danced Terra Dark boosted Sucker Punch was not enough to take out the Garganacl. So then my option was to set up Round Boy, but even with a speed boost, Toadscruel is faster than him. Even with a few fails, I knew this fight was going to be solvable at this level, but my god, it was annoying. I lead with Slight Round on Greedent, having him go for a Swords Dance. Then I protect to get some leftover HP back from the first Body Slam. Then I Swords Dance again, and I get critical hit by Body Slam. I'm surprised this was the run because that could have been very important HP. Then I protect and Swords Dance again to get the +6, and all I needed was to not get paralyzed by Greedent's Body Slams, so there was a bit of RNG grinding involved to get to this point already. But I do have to go for Terrestrialize Sucker Punch because of the crit though, which creates a problem that I'm not going to outspeed everything. However, Arven sends out Garganacl, the only Pokemon I'm able to outspeed with a Trailblaze, and thankfully a +6 Trailblaze is able to one-shot it. As we know, Toadscruel still outspeeds me with 1 speed boost. I just need it to not use Spore and I'll be good. Thankfully it goes for Power Whip, which puts me into range for Overgrow. This lets Trailblaze one-shot it. So then it's time for Scovillain, who I Sucker Punch, one-shot it. Then Cloyster comes in, and with 2 times speed, I was able to outspeed the Cloyster, who was the biggest problem. Slight Round's Trailblaze doesn't one-shot my Bostiff, but I didn't need it to, since I was still able to send in also Round for a Suicide Burb. And you may think that this particular strat was unnecessary, but you absolutely need to be able to outspeed Cloyster, and you absolutely need to one-shot it, or I would just lose. To give you the context, Cloyster has about probably 100 speed here, and Rowlet has 120 speed when it's at level 100. So this means you do need Trailblaze to be able to outspeed it, and you also need Sucker Punch for Scovillain because it's quad resistant to Trailblaze. So pretty much this exact setup is going to be necessary. But with this fight complete, this is the end of Arven's storyline for now. Now it's time for Team Star, and this means we have to fight Director Clavel. He has an Abomasnow, a Houndoom, a Gyarados with Stone Edge, a Sinistea with Shell Smash, and an Oranguru who has Foul Play, which means even the Oranguru does quite a bit of damage to me given my max attack stat. Needless to say, this also took several tries, even at level 68. In order to get past him, I had to lead with Slight Round. I Swords Dance as it goes for Yawn, then I go for Terra Dark Swords Dance as it goes for Foul Play. Even resisted, this still does a ton of damage. I had to have Slight Round holding a Chesto Berry for this fight, and unfortunately it does go for Yawn a second time, which isn't terrible because I do guarantee 2-hit kill it with Trailblaze, but then Abomasnow comes out using Aurora Veil on my sleep turn. I was able to wake up on turn 2 and go for a Sucker Punch. Abomasnow goes for Wood Hammer, which deals enough recoil damage to itself to only need 2 Sucker Punches to take it out. Then he goes for Houndoom, and I want to use up some of the Fire Blast PP, so I go for Protect. It doesn't go for it turn 1, but after a Sucker Punch, it does use it on turn 2. So then Slight Round goes down. Then I go What is Round, using Protect to get some Fire Blast PP down, and then I Sucker Punch with Fire Blast one-shotting. Then Roundish Bish comes in with the same strat. With Houndoom in the red, I swap into Round Boy going for Sucker Punch. Then we have Gyarados come in, and I have Round Boy use Swords Dance, as Intimidate lowered my attack. Then I use Sucker Punch to get damage in on Gyarados. Quite Unround comes in, able to run Stone Edge out of PP. I alternate Trailblaze and Protects until Gyarados then goes down. And now it's time for Polteaguy. Poltergeist. In addition to Shell Smash, it also has weak armor. So long as I am faster, I'll be able to kill it in 2 hits with Trailblaze. Thankfully, I was still faster, even with it at +2 speed, taking it out. His final Pokemon is Meowscarada, going Terra Grass. Sucker Punch does a decent amount of damage, and thankfully, Quite Unround was able to survive a play rough from it. Another Sucker Punch gets it down to half HP before Quite Unround goes down. And then it's up to Also Round, who I have double Sucker Punch for the kill. My god, that fight was stressful, because it was the first time I got past Houndoom, and with me being on one Pokemon at the end was definitely not preferred. With Clavel defeated, it's time for Penny. This battle soundtrack is a banger, by the way. I was preparing for the worst here, but Penny was actually quite easy. Turns out evolutions are kinda bad after all. I lead Slight Round again, having him Swords Dance. With the Terra Dark, he resists a Dark Pulse, which does absolutely nothing. She only keeps using Dark Pulse though, allowing me to easily get to +6 attack. Dark Pulse was doing so little damage, I was able to save my Protects here. After 2 Trailblazes, it goes down. Up next is Leafeon, who wants to use X-Scissor, but a +6 Terra boosted Sucker Punch is enough to one-shot it. Then it's Flareon, who goes for a Baby Doll Eyes to start off, making me waste a Sucker Punch. I decide to Trailblaze, which still does a decent amount of HP even while resisted, but this lets her get big damage with Flare Blitz, which unfortunately burns me. That big damage does make Flareon go down to recoil damage though, which brings Vaporeon in, and the lowered attack stat and burn is enough to let it survive in the red. It does have Aurora Beam, so I have Roundish Bish come in with Sucker Punch. With that down, Jolteon comes in and I protect against Thunder. Then it uses Baby Doll Eyes as I try to Sucker Punch. We did that same exact thing twice. I protect the 3rd Thunder and she misses the 4th one, allowing me to get a free speed boost from Trailblaze. But I don't want to keep Roundish Bish out with the lowered attack here, so I switch to What is Round. With this much Thunder PP done, I decide I should stall it out so I can have somebody else set up. I switch to Round Boy for the 9th Thunder and protect on the 10th one. She goes Baby Doll Eyes as I Swords Dance, netting me +1. This happens again for me to be at +2. Then she goes for Pin Missile, which I was a tad worried about, but thankfully it does 13 damage per hit, so I can heal that back with leftovers pretty easily. Unless she gets lucky, but that's probably not going to happen, so I Swords Dance to +4, then +6. She uses Baby Doll Eyes as I go for the Trailblaze, leaving me at +5. Jolteon goes down, with Sylveon coming in, surviving a Trailblaze. She does get Cute Charm to go off, leaving Round Boy in love with her, and a Moonblast does a lot of damage, leaving him in the red. But she was in range for a Sucker Punch to kill, and that's how I beat Penny on the first try. I won't spoil the end of the storyline here, but I will say, I find this kinda cringe. Pokemon has been doing this no bad guys thing for a few generations here, and I frankly hate it. Where are my evil organizations kidnapping Pokemon and unintentionally trying to destroy the world? But with those out of the way, it's time to go for the Pokemon League. I go for it with all of my burbs at the haha funny level, and I failed the champion assessment. I was using Turbo on my controller, and I accidentally clicked through the dialogue option, and for this small mistake, Rika then throws some shade at me when I actually completed on the second try. But it wasn't my fault, man. I didn't do it on purpose. But now it's time for the Elite Four, who also has a banger soundtrack. First up is Rika, with ground-type Pokemon, the first being Whiscash, who is 4 times weak to my Trailblaze, but it also has Blizzard, which I am 4 times weak to, so I need to PP stall the Blizzard a bit, or just hope it misses. I protect turn 1 and substitute turn 2. Do the same thing on turns 3 and 4, with a protect on turn 5, running it out of PP. Future Sight does pose a bit of an issue, because protect doesn't work on it, but if things go right, I can just make it hit the substitute instead of hitting me. Muddy Water doesn't do quite enough damage to destroy the substitute, and neither does Future Sight actually, so I'm able to build up to +6 attack, allowing me to Terrasilize Trailblaze for the kill. She goes Camera Up, and I protect as a rogue Future Sight from Whiscash is still in play, getting rid of my substitute. I substitute again as it goes for a Yawn, giving me a free turn. What's weird here is that the moves were random, even though Fire Blast is super effective. My Trailblaze is enough to one-shot it though. Donphan does have Sturdy, but it only used Earthquake, which isn't enough to destroy my substitute. Another Trailblaze takes it out, and another 2 knock out the rest of her team. I just want to mention that this was my first Elite Four attempt, and it could have gone poorly because I wasn't sure if I was able to Terrasilize against all 4 of the Elite Four members or not, because I really needed to be able to in order to do this at this level. But thankfully you can, and thankfully you can even change your entire movesets and Pokemon in between members for this game. So next up was Poppy for Steel types, and it was time for Quite Unround to shine. But first I lead Round Boy to do some PP stall shenanigans. I needed to run out of Heavy Slam and play rough to be able to set up, because otherwise I'm definitely not taking out an entire team of Steel types. One Heavy Slam is enough to take out a full substitute, but at least Caparajah is slow enough for me to be faster. Thankfully, Play Rough gets a miss, allowing me to get an extra substitute off with Round Boy. I also get a double protect off for Round Boy to get even more use on the elephant. But with Round Boy down, I bring in Quite Unround to start setting up. I start off by failing a double protect, but the final Play Rough PP wasn't quite enough to one-shot me even when there was Stealth Rock active. Its final 2 moves are Stealth Stealth Rock and High Horsepower, neither of which can deal damage to me, and the AI in this game is not going to switch out, so I'm completely free to set up without even being at risk of taking damage. I do Trailblazes to +5 speed, then I'm able to set up Swords Dance. I do a final Trailblaze once I'm maxed out an attack, taking out the elephant. She then sends out Corviknight, and this is the moment we've been waiting for, the Fire-type Rowlet. But hang on, Rowlet doesn't learn any Fire-type moves, so what do we use? There was a new move introduced in this game called Terra Blast, which is 80 base power and a special move. It's usually a normal type move, but when you're Terrestrialize, it changes to match whatever Terra type you are, and on top of that, it will use whichever of your attack stats is higher for damage calculation. So my +6 speed, +6 attack Rowlet is free to just keep using basically a physical flamethrower. The only potential issue after the setup would be Magnezone Sturdy, but it goes for Light Screen on its only turn, allowing me to comfortably take down her ace Tinkaton. She might only be 7 years old, but she knows how to train her Pokemon. Next up is the Giga Chad, Larry, making his return with Flying type Pokemon. I have to use a similar PP stall strategy here with Tropius, because even though we are Flying type, the moves are still super effective because of our Grass typing. This actually takes both Slight Round and Quite Unround to stall out a PP. When it gets down to just Solar Beam, I swap in What is Round. I have him Protect for when Solar Beam has damaging turns, and then do setup moves during the charging turns. So I employ the same strategy in this fight. I Trailblaze to get full speed, and then Swords Dance to max out attack. And here is where we get our amazing Ice-type Rowlet. The typing that brought us so much pain, so much fear during this playthrough is now going to be our best friend on the Elite Four. But our Ice-type Terra Blast is easily able to clean up the entire team. And the final member of the Elite Four is Hassel, the Dragon-type trainer. And this fight quells any concerns that I may have had over being over-leveled for the Elite Four, because he leads a Noivern. I need to again PP stall this thing, but there is a tiny issue. It has Hyper Voice, which again, sound-based moves ignore Substitute. But strangely, I don't really know what the reasoning for this is. Air Slash also ignores Substitute, and that allows him to claim his first Pokemon. But it wasn't because it was Air Slash, it was because Noivern has Infiltrator. This makes the Pokemon ignore Substitute, Reflect, Light Screen, and Safeguard. So I'm basically at the mercy of whatever move he uses, and I have to hope I have enough Substitutes and Protects to make it through. And it's also faster than I am, which means I have to preemptively Substitute before it breaks the Substitute. And I basically need it to use Air Slash and Hyper Voice on Protect turns, and Dragon Pulse and Super Fang on my non-Protect turns. Though Dragon Pulse should hit me through the Substitute too. But I'm pretty sure that just never happened, because it just turned out that it always used Dragon Pulse on my Protect turns. And once it was out of Air Slash and Hyper Voice PP, I ended up just having one Pokemon left, who just so happened to not have Substitute. So I didn't find out that Dragon Pulse would have hit me through Substitute as well. I didn't find that out until I was doing this voiceover right now. But with it still having some PP for both Dragon Pulse and Super Fang here, this means the setup isn't free, so I do have a limit to how much I can set up for the rest of the Pokemon. I Trailblaze as it goes for Super Fang, cutting my HP in half. I basically need it to use Super Fang when I don't use Protect, and Dragon Pulse when I Protect, because Super Fang will never knock me out as it only ever takes half of your current HP. I go for a second Trailblaze, knowing it will still be faster than me. After that, I go for Swords Dance, which allows it to Dragon Pulse me to 9 HP. Surely I won't be able to come back from this, right? But now that I outspeed, I turn What is Round into an Ice type, and he's actually able to one-shot the entire team with only a +2 speed boost and a +2 attack boost. Even Excalibur, because it gets rid of its Ice typing by going Terra Dragon. But I can tell you what, I was completely sweating bullets during this. This was still my first attempt on this, completely unsure of how much damage I was going to be doing at this entire fight. I had not been using damage calculators up to this point quite yet, so I was unsure of how much I actually needed to set up in order to kill everything. And let me remind you how slow Scarlet and Violet plays. I was like 25 minutes into this fight by the time I was over, but with the Elite Four down, it was time for the champion. Geeta is viewed as an easy champion, but for this challenge it's not completely free. Her Pokemon are a higher level than the Elite Four, and honestly that's enough to make her a bit of a threat, especially since I need to set up on Espathra, and Espathra has Opportunist, which copies whatever stat boosts you have, which means I have to completely stall this thing out of PP, and yes, this even includes the quick attacks, because a +6 quick attack is still going to hurt quite a bit, at least enough to not want to set up against it, and doing this takes literally half an hour. a half hour to PP stall her out of all of her damaging moves. And by that time, Reflect only has a few PP left as well, so I'm not able to use quite as many Trailblaze to do full speed setup against it. I am able to get to +6 attack first though, which should let me take care of the rest of the team. Her second Pokemon is Veluza, who has Ice Fang. Knowing it would probably go for that, I use Terra Fire quite unround for this fight. One Trailblaze is enough to kill, and we outspeed from being able to use +2 on a Sprothra. Then Avalugg comes in, and I'm able to one-shot it before she's able to use Earthquake. After that it's King Gambit, who is eager to get one-shot as well. Go-Goat doesn't have an answer for fire types, so it's quite trivial. And her ace Glimora gets rid of the poison typing, allowing a Trailblaze to one-shot it for the win. So Hassel was honestly more of the real champion battle here, but that was mainly just because of Noivern's ability. So I was over-leveled for the Elite Four in general, but being at 9 HP on my last Pokemon for Hassel, I think it was definitely warranted. After this, it's time for the true champion battle against Nemona. I quite like the pacing of the rival battles in this game, once every couple of gyms, as opposed to stopping you on basically every route. And because I did all that Terraden grinding, I actually hadn't seen Nemona in several days. So honestly, this battle was a bit of a treat, and she actually made me fail the first attempt. But it was really my own fault. So I made the very dumb decision to not Terrastalize before doing Terra Blast, and I was not aware that you had to be Terrastalize for Terra Blast to use your better stat. So with +6 attack, I smack Goodra with the wet noodle that is my special attack stat. And it's not boosted in any way, so it did like 20 damage. But I got things right on the second attempt. She leads with Lycanroc, who has 2 super effective moves against me, Stone Edge and Excel Rock. It starts with a Stealth Rock though, allowing me to get a free substitute to start the PP stalling. 12 minutes and 2 dead burbs later, it was time for Slight Round to come in for the setup. One Trailblaze isn't enough to one-shot it, so I go for that, then go for Swords Dances. After I max attack, another Trailblaze takes it out, and my strat here was the Dark Terra Blast, because Sucker Punch is weaker, and I have speed boost anyway, so I don't really need the priority. Though the main reason was I was too lazy to use PP up on Sucker Punch again, because I had to delete it earlier. A Terra Blast is able to one-shot Goodra, who I used the non-Terra boosted attack on before. For Palmont, I use a Trailblaze because Trailblaze will do more damage here. Then, Terra Blast one-shots the rest of her team, and the whole setup was kind of necessary, because Skeledirge likely would have had a one-shot party on me otherwise, unless all of the birds sucker punching would have done the job, but I felt I was used to the PP stall from the Elite Four, so it wasn't too much to ask for me to do it going forward. But this means we have all of the storylines done, so now it's time for the finale in Area 0. I'm going to try not to spoil the story points here, because it's actually pretty good for a Pokemon game, but I'll just show you the fighting portion. Just kind of wish it had voice acting though, and it makes me wonder if somebody is working on a voice acting mod already. With how many people who are asking for that on this game, I wouldn't be surprised if someone was working on that by now. But anyway, it's time for the big bad fight with Turo. And I'll let you know that I did the calculations and I did the bare minimum before starting this fight. What was the bare minimum, you might ask? Well, I needed 5 birds to be level 100 and the last bird to be level 77. I wish I was joking. You see, if I did sucker punching strats, that might take down 2 Pokemon, if that, and quite literally every Paradox Pokemon has a higher base speed than Rowlet does. Even at level 100, his first Pokemon, Iron Moth, outspeeds. I even need to get lucky with the PP stalling with some double protects here and there. That's how crazy this fight is for a challenge run. So here's what happened. I had to run Iron Moth to exactly 0 PP before sending an also round, the final Rowlet who is level 77. But Struggle does a lot of recoil damage, so the clock is ticking. I Trailblaze twice to be able to outspeed Iron Bundle. Then I Swords Dance until Iron Moth kills itself. But I'm only +4 in attack, so this still isn't guaranteed. I must have miscalculated because Iron Bundle is still faster than me, but I was going Terra Flying, so it wouldn't one-shot me with Freeze Dry anyway. I am able to take it out with 1 Trailblaze though. Then Iron Thorns comes in, and this is the biggest problem for this fight because of how beefy that defense is. And here is where I potentially could have thrown this attempt, because the calculations told me that I was not going to one-shot Iron Thorns at +4 attack, and my monkey brain was thinking I needed some extra leftovers HP. However, I didn't do the damage calculation with Overgrow, and I needed to be under 1/3 HP for that to be in effect here. Thankfully, my leftovers didn't take me out of Overgrow, but with a slightly lower roll on the Freeze Dry from the Iron Bundle, and this could have actually ended this attempt. I was planning to be +6 here, so I would be able to one-shot this guaranteed. However, I didn't factor in how much recoil damage Struggle does in this game, but because I forgot to do my calculations happens for Overgrow, I was like really hyped when I actually one-shot this. But I was like, wait, but the calculation said that I wasn't going to one-shot it no matter what. In the moment, I thought it best to not ask questions. But with Iron Thorns out of the way, the Terra-flying Terra Blast was easily able to one-shot the rest of the team, including a crit on the final Iron Valiant, which was completely unnecessary. But unfortunately, this doesn't end there. There is one more fight, and we aren't able to use our Rowlets here, so we have to use our Miraidon. But honestly, it's kind of fine, because this scene kind of gives me chills, even the second time through, and even while scripting the video. The story is pretty good, what can I say? But not only does this battle break the nothing but Rowlet rule, it also kind of breaks the whole no friendship mechanic rule in a certain way. I do think technically there is a way to avoid the 1 HP clutch, but I definitely wasn't going to do that entire Turo fight again for a technicality, especially not in a fight that already breaks the rules of the challenge just because it exists in the first place. But aside from this forced plot battle, as well as the few that were in the tutorial of the game, it's entirely possible to roll the credits for Pokemon Violet at least with only a team of Rowlets. And I think doing a full team of 6 was the right choice for this run, as it puts off having to go to level 100 much earlier, and this way you quite literally only need to be at level 100 for the last battle before the credits. And that was for defensive stalling purposes. Offensively, you can do it not at level 100. But even though I had rolled the credits, my Rowlets hadn't achieved everything there was to achieve just yet. It was time for the post-game. For this post-game, we have to battle all of the gym leaders again, as well as the Academy Ace tournament. And I wanted to hold off on using the level 100 Rowlets if possible. All of the gym leader Pokemon are level 65, so one level 78 Rowlet is already plenty for some of them. Starting back at the Bug Gym with Katie, she leads with a Low Kicks. I did reset this fight once, making a mistake by terastallizing too early. Low Kicks knows Bounce, a 2-turn super effective move, so I can just protect on turn 2. It does randomly use Lunge as well, which lowers my attack by a stage when it goes off, but this basically means I need an extra Swords Dance to get to +6. Then I terastallize to Flying type, so Bounce won't be super effective, but it didn't matter because as it came down, it missed, allowing me to Trailblaze freely. The next turn is Sucker Punches, but it's already too late. Fortress is next, and it does have Sturdy, so it was able to get a Gyro Ball off on me. But it's confusing me as to why it went for that because it has Stone Edge, which would have been super effective still, but she didn't use it. I clean up the rest of the HP with a Trailblaze. Then comes in the Heracross, who also has Stone Edge, but it doesn't have Sturdy, so it goes down with a one-shot. Then Spidops comes in with a Silk Trap, but fun fact, even when Terra Blast uses your physical attack, it doesn't count as making contact, which means it was basically a regular Protect here, not lowering my speed. And then her last Pokemon is Ursaring, who gets one-shot thanks to her ill-advised Bug-type terastallization, though I likely still would have been able to one-shot it anyway. Next, it was back to the Grass Gym, and even with Terra Flying, this one did take a few tries. Lilligant has Quiver Dance, and it's random how many times it uses it, and it uses these Quiver Dances to power up a Hyper Beam. So I would get one shot on some of my setups and have to try again. I can live with 2 Quiver Dances, but 3 of them gets me one shot. I start off the fight with a couple of my own dances involving swords, as it goes for 2 Quiver Dances into a Hyper Beam with a light screen on the first turn. This lets me take it out with 2 Trailblazes, having enough speed for everything. He then goes Sarina, which is an odd choice as it's had no obvious reason to be out next. It's not supposed to be up in his order of Pokemon, but he brought it out anyway. It gets one shot by a Terra Blast, as does Breloom, who was only a slight concern because of Mach Punch and or Thunder Punch. Against Arboliva, I decide to Trailblaze, because even though it isn't a one-shot, it goes for Grassy Terrain. However, its ability Seed Sower will activate Grassy Terrain when it takes damage, meaning he wasted a turn while I got a speed boost. I am also concerned with my HP here, as Sudowoodo is last, again with Sturdy, and if he was smart, he would use Ice Punch or Stone Edge here, but he just goes for a Trailblaze wanting the speed boost. And just to make sure I'm faster, I use a Trailblaze of my own to break the Sturdy, even though Sudowoodo is slow enough that it probably didn't matter. After healing, I realized I unlocked the Judge function, and I am happy to report that Round Boy was indeed the best Rowlet that I hatched. There were a few other 5IV Rowlets in the box, but none of them had their final stat high enough to compete with Round Boy's 29 defense. There were some better options for the rest, but it's actually really cool knowing I picked the hands down best Rowlet that I possibly could have for this playthrough. So next up was Iono again at the Electric Gym, and unfortunately I did need to use my other burbs to stall this one, mainly because Also Round is Terra Flying, and I don't want to have to change it. Terra Ground probably would have been good here, meaning I would have only had to have Hurricane to worry about, but Terra Shards are hard to come by, and I didn't want to change it in the event we actually needed someone to be Terra Flying with Double Stab in the future. After stalling out the Hurricane PP, I got impatient and decided even discharge probably wasn't a huge deal. So I sent in also round to get to work. And thankfully I did this because it didn't even discharge a single time once he came in. And I set up to go +6 attacks with Sword Dance, and thankfully I don't one-shot it with Trailblaze, allowing me to get some extra speed. And then she sends out Luxray because of Ice Fang. But thankfully Trailblaze is able to one-shot it. Trailblaze was just barely not enough to one-shot the Belly Bolt, however, but it misses Thunder. My goodness, that could have been bad. It does Sucker Punch me before going down, but I'd much rather take that than a damage from Thunder. And from here, I was able to use Terra Blast to knock out the Electrode and Miss Magius. But again, Iono is kinda tough if you bring a Flying-type Pokemon. Kofu, though, he was just as easy as the first time. I don't know if this is a chance thing or something, but it was sandstorming during both of his battles with me. He starts with a Veluza. I Trailblaze on first turn, and then Swords Dance once, then Trailblaze again to be faster than everything. I do get knocked to about half HP by Veluza, but it's no big deal. Next is Pelipper, who I'm able to one-shot with Terra Blast. And it was during this fight, by the way, where I realized Overgrow was active on Iron Thorns. A bit late, yes I know, but Terra Blast was able to take out the rest of his team, even only at +2. And now it was time for Larry again. I did have to reset once on this fight because if I wanted to just use Also Round, then I was gonna need the Oink alone not to paralyze me. First turn I use Swords Dance, then a Trailblaze. I Trailblaze again for more HP, but then I'm free to use Terra Blast to take care of the rest of the team again. Still doing calculations at this point here, but I didn't consider the Intimidate attack drop. So Staraptor was maybe a concern, but it did still one-shot at +1. The Ghost Gym was the main interesting one because of the double battle. I kinda had to use a weird setup on this one. I gave Round Boy Light Screen and Helping Hand, seeing as I didn't want to use him to deal any damage, along with the tried and true Substitute Protect. But the fight was interesting because I could never guarantee that it wasn't going to just double focus Also Round and just kill him. So let's begin. I Terrastallize Also Round right away, breaking Mimikyu's disguise with a Trailblaze, and I throw up a Light Screen with Round Boy. Also Round avoids Mimikyu's attack, but Banette actually proved to be a problem because of Icy Wind lowering my speed. I protect next turn for leftovers HP, then Banette goes for Phantom Force, allowing me to set up a little bit. But they hard focus Also Round, bringing him to very low HP. Not quite Overgrow range yet, but close. I have Also Round go for Trailblaze and Round Boy give him Helping Hand, which was enough to take out Mimikyu. And this has Rhyme send in the Houndstone. It has Ice Fang, so I do need to get it off the field immediately. And in targeting Houndstone, I need to hope that Banette's Phantom Force that it used was not aimed at Also Round. But even with a Helping Hand boost, Trailblaze doesn't quite one-shot Houndstone, and it gets to use Ice Fang, but it thankfully aims at Round Boy instead of Also Round. And Banette also aimed at Round Boy, meaning this fight is actually not going too poorly. Next turn, I double protect the birds, defending them from the ice moves from both of the Pokemon. I Trailblaze to finish off Houndstone and have Round Boy put up another substitute. With Houndstone down, Spiritomb comes in. I protect with both Burbs for HP, with next turn having to click Terra Blast and hoping that Spiritomb doesn't Sucker Punch Also Round. It doesn't, and I'm able to get that one shot. With Toxtricity in, I go for Protect, then have Helping Hand boosted Terra Blast come in for the one shot. I needed to be +1 speed here, otherwise an Overdrive from Toxtricity was a guaranteed one-hit KO on Also Round. But thankfully, all the speed drops we had from Icy Wind left me at exactly +1 speed. I probably should have gotten rid of Banette earlier, but the base power of Icy Wind was low enough that it really didn't pose too much of a threat. The main inconvenience was the speed drops, but perhaps there's something a bit Giga Chad about sweeping her entire team while she had this super effective move on the field though. And even though this was the first try, I felt that the double battle made things more interesting, since I was never guaranteed for Also Round not to be taking damage. So with Rhyme defeated, it's back to Tulip for the Psychic type gym, and this one was unexpectedly one of the easiest of them all. I started with a Trailblaze, thinking I wouldn't outspeed Farigiraf, but apparently it's super slow, and its stab boosted Zen Headbutt did basically no damage to me. This was so easy, I did all of my setup without protect stalling really whatsoever. I protected the first turn against each of our Pokemon as they came out, but I didn't need to, as I easily outspeed and one-shot everything at +4 attack and +2 speed. The fight only took 6 minutes, which was quite a relief after a lot of those battles I needed to PP stall to get through. And that leaves one gym leader left, our old nemesis, Grusha. Obviously, I had to PP stall on this one, however, it wasn't as big of a stall as it could have been. I switch also round in while it still had 1 PP left for Bug Buzz. But I was able to correctly predict the turn it would use it, protecting from it, allowing me to fully set up also round. With it only having Tailwind PP left, that was pretty easy. And I was able to get +3 speed and +6 attack, which was entirely necessary for me to be able to take down this gym. We did need a second Rowlet to do it with, but still, I did actually have to go to level 100 to make this one possible. And getting the Ice-type gym leader on the first try, I'll take that, man. So it was time for the final boss of this challenge run. The date with Geeta in my dorm room. I spent like 20 minutes going around, seeing what outfits I was able to put on for this. And I eventually settled on this one. And I lead her into my room, and she just asks me about gym leaders all night. Like, we didn't even kiss or anything. And then I was trying to talk to Nimona about it, but she just was talking to me about the Academy Ace tournament and battling all day. And I thought maybe if I beat Geeta in the Academy Ace tournament, then maybe I'll get that kiss, you know? And I decided I would give Also Round the proper Academy Ace tournament experience by making him level 100 like the rest of the squad. But part of that was because I did have to plan quite a bit ahead for this tournament, because unlike the Elite Four, you can't change up your team at all once you enter it. The first time you enter the tournament, the opponents are the same, so you can strategize around it. The optimal choice here was to use Quite Unround and Terra Fire, with all of my other birds being stall machines. So let's see how that went. Arvin is first, and for Greedent, I basically just need to stall out the Body Slam PP. Its ground type move can't hit me, and Psychic Fangs and Bullet Seeds do so little damage, I decided to just set up against those. With max speed and attack, I was able to easily take down everything on Arvin's team. And it was just oh so good to say that, because of how much of a nightmare his team was in this storyline. Our teacher Jacques is up second, and he leads with Arcanine. Even if I wanted to PP stall it, its Flare Blitz ended up killing himself with recoil damage, meaning I had to PP stall out the second Pokemon, Swalot. It had Protect, Fire Punch, Ice Punch, and Toxic, and I was quite ballsy, not even running it out of Toxic PP before switching in. And this could have really backfired, but Toxic wasn't enough to kill me before I was able to kill his entire team, even with only going +2 attack. Some secret to the ways I raise my Pokemon? It's the Pokemon that I use. It's obviously just the best Pokemon in the game. It's too broken. Needs to be banned. The third opponent is Dendra, and if I could have, I would have just led Quite Unround to start off with, because her Phalanx is an incredibly easy matchup. But the rest of her team is very sketchy. Both of the Tauros have super effective moves, and both have Intimidate, meaning I would be losing some of my attack boost. After going +6 Swords Dance, I finish off the Phalanx with a Trailblaze for +2 speed. Since I have not gone Terra Fire yet, she sends in Medicham, who has Ice Punch, which is nice to get that out of the way. Terra Fire Blast takes it out. Next she sends in Tauros Fire, who, notice, I don't have super effective move for, but a Fire Terra Blast at +5 was able to one-shot it. Then Tauros Water comes in, which a Trailblaze was able to one-shot at the +4. Then Hawlucha was a one-shot, and Hariyama was also a one-shot, even through Thick Fat. So I'm not sure if I had something wrong on the calculator, but I think I had the Reflect box tick from the Psychic Gym when I did those calcs, and that entire fight the calcs were Monka W because of that. It was saying that I wouldn't one-shot Tauros Fire or Hariyama, yet I did, and I realized it was still toggled on the champion battle, so yeah, I'm pretty sure that's what happened. But with her down, it's the last fight of the tournament, in the rematch with Geeta, and it basically goes the exact same way. Seeing as how I have level 100 this time, I didn't have to completely stall her out like I did the first time. I just let her have some quick attack PP by the time I send in Quite Unround, and I didn't even have to sacrifice a Rowlet on this one. With no threat on Espathra, I was able to set up for the free sweep on the rest of her team with Quite Unround. Terra Fire Rowlet is actually a quite good counter to her entire team. The biggest threat was the Espathra, but the rest of the moveset doesn't turn it into a threat. So yeah, maybe Geeta is kind of a bad champion. But with that is Pokemon Violet with a full team of illegal Rowlets. What's kind of upsetting is even when Rowlet becomes legal, I might not be able to use these guys, seeing as how they were created from hacked Pokemon. Because they have hacked Pokemon in their lineage, they might be illegal for stuff. But I tend to not transfer my Pokemon around anyway, so it's really whatever. My in-game time here was 54 hours and 14 minutes, which was largely due to changing the Terra types of my team. Without that, this could probably be done between 25 to 30 hours of gameplay. I don't think the Terra type change was necessary to complete the game because Turo is the hardest fight, and for that I used Terra Flying, but I thought it would be fun to go ahead and change their Terra types because it's a cool new feature, and it should help make some challenge runs feel a bit more lively. But that is going to do it for this one, and if you made it here, you probably enjoyed something about the video, right? So consider hitting that like button for me. And if you want to see me do some more of these longer challenges like this, then the best way for you to help me do that is to hit that subscribe button. But that's going to do it from me and the Round Squad. I have been Trevor, I go by Trails, and I will catch you guys next time.